You earn more than your parents ever dreamed, yet you're closer to collapse than they ever were. This is the paradox of the modern elite. Consider a household where she earns $62,000 in marketing and he pulls $71,000 in IT. Their combined $133,000 income puts them in the top 25% of Americans. They did everything right: the degrees, the careers, the house in a top-tier district. They should be indomitable. Instead, they're drowning, exhausted, and one car repair away from total insolvency. This isn't a lecture, it's an autopsy of a systemic deception called the two-income trap. I'm revealing the hidden math of why that second $50,000 salary disappears, leaving you with almost nothing to show for your sacrifice. Before we strip away the illusions, what city are you watching from? And does your combined income actually feel like enough at the end of the month? Tell me your situation below. Part 1. The Anatomy of a Collapse. You earn more than your parents ever dreamed, yet you're closer to collapse than they ever were. This is the paradox of the modern elite. Consider a household where she earns $62,000 in marketing and he pulls $71,000 in IT. Their combined $133,000 income puts them in the top 25% of Americans. They did everything right: the degrees, the careers, the house in a top-tier district. They should be indomitable. Instead, they're drowning, exhausted, and one car repair away from total insolvency. This isn't a lecture, it's an autopsy of a systemic deception called the two-income trap. In this video, I'm revealing the hidden math of why that second $50,000 salary disappears, leaving you with almost nothing to show for your sacrifice. Before we strip away the illusions, what city are you watching from? And does your combined income actually feel like enough at the end of the month? Tell me your situation below. Part 2. The 1970 Anchor. Why your grandfather was richer. To understand how we were robbed, we must look at the data from 1970. Back then, only 43% of women were in the workforce. The standard middle-class model was a single breadwinner. This is where the elite of today get confused. They look at the lower nominal salaries of the 1970s and feel superior, but they ignore the most important metric in finance: purchasing power and financial margin. In 1970, a median single-income family spent only 25% of their earnings on housing. They could afford health care, a reliable vehicle, and a dignified life on one paycheck. More importantly, they possessed a hidden asset: the stay-at-home parent. In financial terms, that parent was a massive insurance policy. If the father lost his job or fell ill, the mother could enter the workforce. That second potential income was an untapped emergency reserve. It was liquid flexibility. Today, we have activated that reserve just to pay for the basics. Female workforce participation has climbed to 57%, and in 60% of married households, both parents are grinding. We have moved the backup plan into the primary position. We have no more cards to play. Think about this contrast. Your grandfather had one income and one massive safety net. You have two incomes and zero safety net. You are working twice as hard for half the security. While median household income has risen when adjusted for inflation, it has been completely cannibalized by three specific sectors: housing, healthcare, and education. Housing costs have doubled relative to inflation since 1970. Healthcare spending per household is up 600%. College costs have exploded by 200%. All that extra money from the second worker didn't go into your brokerage account. It went into the pockets of the banks, the hospitals, and the universities. You didn't double your wealth, you simply doubled your overhead. Part 3. The Autopsy of the Second Income. Now, let us look at the cold, hard math of the second salary. This is where the deception becomes undeniable. The average person sees a $50,000 second income and thinks they are $50,000 richer. The 1% knows better. First, we must discuss the tax hammer. Because the first earner has already exhausted the lower tax brackets, every dollar earned by the second spouse is taxed at the highest marginal rate. When you factor in federal, state, and payroll taxes, That $50,000 is instantly reduced to roughly $33,000. You have lost 34% of your labor before you have even left the driveway. Next, we look at childcare. In 1970, this cost was zero. Today, the average American family pays $15,000 per year per child. If you have two children, that is $30,000. Your second income, which was $50,000, is now worth exactly $3,000. But we haven't accounted for the cost of the grind. Two working parents require two commutes. Between fuel, maintenance, insurance, and the depreciation of a second vehicle, you are looking at $8,000 minimum. Your $50,000 income is now negative $5,000. You are literally paying for the privilege of working. The final blow is what I call exhaustion spending. When both parents work 50 hours a week and spend another 10 hours in traffic, no one has the cognitive energy to manage a household. You start paying for convenience. You pay for Uber Eats because you are too tired to cook. You pay for a cleaning service because you are too tired to scrub. You pay for lawn care because your weekends are spent catching up on laundry. These convenience taxes easily drain another $7,000 to $10,000 a year. Add it all up. That $50,000 gross income results in a net contribution of perhaps $2,000. That is $8 per workday. You are missing your children's first steps, sacrificing your health, and enduring corporate politics for $1 an hour. The average person calls this career growth. The elite call this a bad trade. If you stopped working tomorrow, would your world collapse in 30 days? If the answer is yes, you are not an elite professional. You are a high-priced tenant of your own life. You are working for the bank, the daycare center, and the tax man. If you are ready to stop being the tool of the system and start being the architect of your freedom, comment the word builder below. Part 4. The bidding war. The arms race of the middle class. Why did this happen? It happened because of a psychological phenomenon called the bidding war for opportunity. When two-income households became the norm, something changed in the housing market. In 1970, families competed for houses based on what one income could afford. When everyone suddenly had two incomes, they didn't save the extra cash. They used it to outbid each other for the best houses in the best school districts. It is a classic arms race. If your neighbor has two incomes to put toward a mortgage, you must have two incomes to compete. If you don't, your children end up in the underfunded school district. This created a massive price escalation in the one area that is non-negotiable for parents: education. You aren't paying for a nicer house. You are paying an educational tax disguised as a $400,000 mortgage. The two-income trap is a treadmill that speeds up every time you think you are gaining ground. You moved to a better neighborhood for the schools, which required a higher mortgage, which required you to work longer hours, which required you to buy more convenience services, which left you with less money than you had when you lived in the smaller house on one income. You have traded your time and your freedom for a zip code. Part 5. The 2026 variable, AI, and the digital treadmill. We must also address the reality of 2026. The original research into this trap was conducted decades ago, but today the situation is even more precarious. We are living in an era of AI-driven job volatility. The second income, which you have already fully committed to your fixed costs, is no longer guaranteed. In the past, a white-collar job in marketing or IT was a fortress. Today, those roles are being streamlined by automation. If one of those incomes disappears in 2026, the two-income household doesn't just lose a paycheck, they lose their entire infrastructure. They cannot simply cut back on Starbucks. You cannot cut back on a mortgage, a car lease, or property taxes. These are fixed costs. Furthermore, we are battling the lifestyle creep fueled by social media. The Joneses of 1970 were the people on your block. The Joneses of 2026 are the curated influencers on your screen. You are competing with a global elite for a lifestyle that doesn't exist. You are spending the second income to project an image of prosperity while your bank account is a hollow shell. We often talk about the money, but let us talk about the cost to the soul. I know there are people watching this who feel an immense quiet pressure every Sunday night. You feel the weight of the mortgage, the debt, and the realization that you are trapped in a cycle you never chose. You and your partner are like two ships passing in the night, too exhausted to connect, too stressed to enjoy the life you are working so hard to maintain. If you have ever felt like you are performing for a life you don't even like, you are not alone. Share your story in the comments. This is a safe space for the visionaries to speak the truth. Part 6. The One Income Foundation, the Elite Architecture. So, how do the 1% escape? They do not play the game of maximum qualification. When a bank tells an elite couple they qualify for a $1 million mortgage, the elite couple buys a $400,000 house. This is the strategy of the One Income Foundation. The rule is simple. Your fixed, non-negotiable costs must be covered by the lower of the two incomes. Everything else is secondary. If you earn $75,000 and your spouse earns $55,000, you must architect a life that functions on $50,000. This sounds impossible in a world of $7 lattes and $1,000 iPhones, but it is the only way to achieve genuine sovereignty. When you live on one income, the second income ceases to be a survival tool and becomes a weapon of wealth. Step 1. Build a 12-month emergency reserve. Not 3 months, 12 months. This is your walkaway money. Step 2. Aggressively eliminate all consumer debt. Debt is the chain that keeps you in the trap. Step 3. Deploy the second income into cash-flowing assets. S&P 500 index funds, real estate, or private equity. Within 5 to 10 years of this approach, a miracle occurs. Your investments begin to generate a third income. This income doesn't require you to sit in traffic or endure a performance review. It is passive. It is resilient. Suddenly, you have what the two-income household will never have: choice. If one parent wants to stay home with the children, they can. If one partner wants to start a business, they can. If a health crisis hits, the financial structure doesn't even flinch. This is the difference between wealth and income. Income is what you do for money. Wealth is what money does for you. The elite understand that the greatest luxury in the world is not a European sports car or a mansion in the hills. The greatest luxury is margin. It is the ability to breathe. It is the ability to look at your boss and know that you don't actually need the paycheck to survive. That is power. Part 7. The Call to Action. Join the 1%. The two-income trap is a choice. Every day you choose to either tighten the knot or begin untying it. It requires a level of discipline that the average person simply does not possess. It means driving the older car while your colleagues lease new ones. It means living in a good enough house while your friends overextend for the dream home. But remember this: the people who look wealthy are often the most enslaved. The people who are truly wealthy are often the ones you never notice. If this analysis has opened your eyes, then you have a responsibility to act. Wealth is not about how much you make. It is about how much you keep and how much freedom you buy with it. Stop bidding up the price of your own cage. For those of you still watching, here is the final hard truth. The system does not want you to be financially independent. The system wants you exhausted, indebted, and dependent on 2 paychecks. An exhausted person is easy to control. A person with 12 months of cash in the bank is a threat to the status quo. Be a threat. If you have stayed until the end, I want you to comment the secret password, "I am awake." This tells me you are part of the 1% who actually finishes what they start. If you found value in this masterclass, hit the like button and share this with a partner who needs to hear this truth. Subscribe and join a community of builders and visionaries who are rewriting the rules of the game. Now your next step is waiting. Click the video on the screen right now to learn how to transition from a high-income earner to a high-net-worth individual. Your journey to true sovereignty begins there. I will see you in the next one.